It's 4 p.m. in Nelson, British Columbia, 6 p.m. in Thompson, Manitoba, and 7 o'clock in Ottawa, the nation's capital. This is Canada Tonight. Hockey bombshell. 5 former World Junior players are expected to face sex assault charges. Standing steady. The Bank of Canada announces interest rates will stay at 5%. Meeting at the intersection tonight, Riley Yesno, Mitzi Hunter, and Kari Vierma to discuss the state of our country's healthcare system. Tucker Carlson meeting Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. And on tonight's Spotlight, in the wake of today's news, Sheldon Kennedy talks about what needs to change in hockey culture.
From the Canadian Broadcasting Centre, this is Canada Tonight with Travis Dhanraj.
And good Wednesday evening to you. Here is what else we are tracking. We have new details tonight from the Northwest Territories on that deadly plane crash that killed 6 people. Juanita Taylor will walk us through the investigation and what we know new tonight. Lindsay Duncombe is in Vancouver and will join us live to talk about the record number of deaths in BC due to toxic drug use. And our chief correspondent and host of The National, Adrienne Arsenault, will be here with me in studio to talk about her Canadian exclusive interview with Ukraine's First Lady. But we begin tonight with news that is rocking the hockey world. The Globe and Mail is reporting 5 members of Canada's 2018 World Junior Hockey team have been told to surrender to police. Now, according to the paper, the charges are in connection to an alleged group sexual assault of a woman in a hotel room in London, Ontario. Our Sarah Galashian is at our breaking news desk tracking the very latest on this developing story, and she joins me now. So good evening to you, Sarah. What do we know about these charges at this point? Because police right now are not confirming them. It's just this report in the Globe and Mail.
Yeah, no, Travis, that's correct. I mean, of course, CBC is working to independently verify what the Globe and Mail is reporting. That reporting is based on sources. I think what we can say that we do know pretty much for certain right now this hour is that we won't be getting that confirmation from official channels at the London Police Service. They were inundated, as you might imagine, with media calls earlier today and subsequently did put out a statement, a press release and a social media post acknowledging significant public interest related to a sexual assault investigation that does go back to 2018, saying that they anticipate being able to share details of that investigation at a press conference, that press conference not to be held until Monday, February 5th. So that is just shy of 2 weeks. That's a lot of lead time for a press conference. But it could be, I mean, regardless of what they had to say about that investigation, it is long-awaited details on an investigation that really goes back to 2018. It was opened, it was closed, and then reopened again by the London police in 2022 when the public became aware of these allegations being made by an unnamed woman, an accuser who sued, civil suit. She sued 8 unnamed players, Hockey Canada, as well as the Canadian Hockey League for more than $3.5 million. You'll remember that case was settled for an undisclosed amount outside of court, but from the statement of claim and as well as court filings that have since been unsealed, we know some of what informed the police investigation, or what is informing the police investigation, essentially the accusation that this woman met a player in a bar, that there was alcohol consumed, they went back to a hotel, there was consensual sex, but then at some point later that evening, multiple players entered that room, and that's when the alleged group sexual assault took place, that there was videotape, that she was, on that videotape, asked if she was okay, was seen to be wiping her eyes and slurring words, and according to those court documents, Travis, telling police she had no recollection of any recording being made.
And of course, then there were those text messages back and forth afterwards. You know, we have been hearing reporting on this story for quite some time, as you mentioned, Sarah, and we learned about these allegations some time ago. There was public outrage at that point, and it sparked a lot of debate and led to a number of investigations. Let's talk about that.
Well, that's right. I mean, not only did the police reopen their investigation, but in 2022, because of the outcry here, we had the NHL having an investigation. Hockey Canada had an investigation. Remember, we're talking about elite-level Canadian hockey players. They played on the 2018 World Junior team. But we have no details, nothing public made of any of the NHL investigation or nothing known from the Hockey Canada investigation. But among those who are expressing interest in what might come from the London Police Service is Canada's sports minister, who put out a lengthy social media post earlier today, writing that the reckoning, part of it reads, the reckoning that we are seeing in hockey and across the sports system is the result of brave survivors coming forward with to share their lived experiences. As well, she says that she's aware of recent developments regarding the London police investigation involving members of the 2018 junior team. Doesn't elaborate on what exactly those developments that she's aware of might be. But once again, Travis, the Globe and Mail reporting that 5 members of that 2018 team have been told to surrender themselves to the London police to face charges of sexual assault.
Okay, Sarah at our breaking news desk following the very latest details on this story from Vancouver. Thank you, Sarah. Let's get more now. We are joined by Kim Shore. She is a safe sport advocate, and she joins us right now from Calgary. So, Kim, let me first get your reaction to all of this.
My reaction is that I think all of us are as survivors, are standing with the woman who is alleging these assaults happened. We believe her. We don't need any more proof. The delay in this process has been justice denied, quite frankly. But I think overall we're glad that this is finally coming to fruition, and hopefully these individuals will be held accountable for what they did wrong, and the sport organizations will really take this as a wake-up call that they need to do far better than they've done.
Well, and do you think that this sends a message broadly, kind of across sport, not just hockey, but beyond that as well?
Yes, I think so, because, you know, sport has enjoyed this impunity. They think they are above the law, above the rules that govern society. In general, sport has a culture that thinks that it is exceptional, and it's not. And we have got to start paying attention to those cultural norms within sport that are actually causing people extreme harm. So yes, I think this will send a broader message to the entire sport community that you are no longer able to avoid the same sort of penalties that would apply to a normal Canadian citizen, and that from even a moral perspective, that this is no longer something Canadians are willing to accept.
Can you talk about the culture that you think exists right now in hockey? This is something that we're talking to Sheldon Kennedy a little bit about later on the program, but tell me a little bit about that right now.
Sure. Well, your previous reporter said it well when she emphasized the word elite hockey players. And there's this sort of celebrity status that we apply to athletes who have been highly successful in sport. And unfortunately, that feeds a mentality that says you can have whatever you want, you can do whatever you want, and the consequences that apply to regular people don't apply to you. And that's an extremely dangerous culture to be a part of. And it puts all of our children at risk, because this isn't just happening at the elite level. This is happening all the way from the grassroots of hockey up to the NHL. And it's the mindset and the norms that children are growing up with in the sport of hockey that is going to determine their future behavior. And it'll determine the safety of your children, my children, and anyone else that comes in contact with players that have been brought up to think that they don't have to abide by the same rules and laws that the rest of us do.
I know that you were at those hockey hearings that were on Parliament Hill in Ottawa, and you listened to that intently. What specific changes would you like to see within the hockey world, but also with other sports organizations?
Yeah, well, more broadly, we have been calling, survivors like myself, advocates across the country, have been calling for a national inquiry. And the government has called now for a commission, which is going to reflect sort of a truth and reconciliation style. And they have told us that's what's best for us, but we still don't agree. We still would like to see a mechanism with judicial powers that an inquiry would have had. I think broadly, the sports system is absolutely corrupt, and it exists because it covers up wrongdoing on a regular basis. It pretty much needs to be burnt down and rebuilt, not in the image of the original architects. It needs to be rebuilt with voices of survivors who are experts in how to avoid harm, and it needs to be rebuilt with voices from marginalized communities that have not been invited to the table until this time.
Okay, that is Kim Shore joining us from Calgary. She is a safe sport advocate and co-founder of Gymnasts for Change. Well, a little later on, as I just mentioned, on the Canada Tonight Spotlight, I sit down with former Canadian hockey player Sheldon Kennedy. The former NHLer discusses the advocacy work that he is doing right now and also gets into the abuse that he endured, that is, and the stigma that came with it for decades. That powerful conversation coming up in about 20 minutes right here on Canada Tonight. All right, switching gears now. The Bank of Canada is keeping its eye on interest rates, and they're keeping it unchanged for the fourth time, that is, in a row. Paula Duhachik is following this story for us from Calgary. So, Paula, we heard, the Bank of Canada governor today. What did he say about today's decision and why they're keeping things steady?
Well, Governor Tiff Macklem says that conversations over the Bank of Canada are shifting. It's no longer about whether interest rates are high enough. Instead, it's more so about how long interest rates need to stay steady before the bank can start cutting. Now, Macklem says he understands that high interest rates have been tough on many Canadians, but he says they are working and are helping the economy rebalance. That being said, wages are still climbing, housing and food inflation are still high, and that means the bank is taking a cautious approach. Now, as you can see in this chart, we have been in a bit of a holding pattern for a while now when it comes to interest rates. The bank says that needs to continue and that those higher interest rates need some more time to do their job, which of course is to bring inflation back down.
Paula, have we any sense of when we'll see rate cuts?
Well, of course, that is the question that is on everybody's minds right now. Macklem was asked directly about that, but he refused to speculate about when exactly this might happen. That being said, economists with both BMO and CIBC say it could happen around June of this year. Still, even when the bank does start to cut interest rates, some experts say it's not going to be a major haircut. Instead, it's going to be more of a trim. Take a listen.
It's going to be higher, in my view, than pre-pandemic, right? I think pre-pandemic, that low for long era is probably, over, but you never know, right? Big recessions and things get, rates go back down to zero. A lot of things can affect that neutral rate, but I do suspect we're in for a, slightly higher or on the higher end of the bank's neutral rate range, in the medium term.
For now, though, we do still have that interest rate sticking at 5%, something that many economists say will likely continue at least a little while longer.
All right, Paul Duhachik in Calgary, thank you.
Thank you.
Officials say 6 people have been killed in a plane crash near Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. 1 survivor has been taken to hospital. The RCMP and Transportation Safety Board are investigating. Our Juanita Taylor has the latest.
The Northwestern Air Lease flight was on its way to Diavik Diamond Mine. In a news release, Rio Tinto confirmed the flight was carrying workers to Diavik Diamond Mine, about 500 kilometers from Fort Smith. Officials have not said how many people were on board that flight, but the territory's chief coroner said a statement will be released today with more information. Meanwhile, the people of Fort Smith are grappling with what has happened.
Our thoughts and our hearts and our prayers are out to those who are all affected. I mean, everybody has a little piece of somebody that they know, or it's very devastating, and families are grieving.
The Transportation Safety Board is sending a team of investigators to the crash site. For the people of Fort Smith and across the Northwest Territories, counseling services are being offered by the Health and Social Services Authority to help with the pain and shock being felt by so many people. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Rankin Inlet, Nunavut.
Police in Edmonton have laid charges against a man accused of firing a gun inside of City Hall. The incident yesterday sent the building into a lockdown. City Hall was full of visitors, staff, and politicians at the time. Now, fortunately, no one was injured. The 28-year-old suspect is also accused of throwing a Molotov cocktail from the 2nd floor. The Charges include arson, careless use of a firearm, and throwing explosives with the intent to cause harm. Edmonton City Hall, well, it remains closed today, and the mayor says that it won't reopen until a review of the building security protocols has been completed. Also in Alberta, that province's Premier Danielle Smith shared the stage today with former Fox News host Tucker Carlson. The two were in Calgary earlier with thousands gathered to hear their remarks. Another huge crowd is expected tonight at Tucker Carlson's next stop, which is Edmonton. This tour follows a string of international trips for the American commentator. After the break, former NHL player turned child protection advocate Sheldon Kennedy, he sits down in our Canada Tonight spotlight. Plus, our chief correspondent stops by to talk about her Canadian exclusive with the Ukrainian First Lady. And later in the program, a new study breaks down the impacts of climate change on the Amazon. We'll have that and much more right here on Canada Tonight. Stay with us. Well, revisiting our top story tonight, the Globe and Mail is reporting that 5 members of the 2018 Canadian World Junior Hockey Team have been ordered to surrender to police in London, Ontario, to face sexual assault charges. The report says the charges are connected to the alleged assault of a woman after a fundraising event in 2018. The CBC has not independently verified these facts. London police have not commented on the case, but say they expect to hold a press conference on February 5th. Well, welcome back to Canada Tonight. In the spotlight tonight is Canadian hockey star Sheldon Kennedy. After overcoming years of abuse and addiction, the former NHLer has become a vocal supporter for those who continue to grapple with similar issues. He took the time to sit down with us last week and share his experiences. Sheldon Kennedy, welcome. You know, I want to talk to you about mental health and what you're doing to change hockey culture, but I really want to start with your story, which is well known. You have been very open about the abuse you suffered. And I know that you once said that I had to say something or I was going to die. How bad did the shame get? How bad did the drug abuse get when you were at your lowest?
Well, first of all, thanks, Travis, for having me and having these conversations. And I think, you know, one of the things that's really, I believe, a little bit of a myth is the impact of any form of abuse, any form of discrimination and neglect, and you know, and I felt that, and I think sometimes the impact is invisible, and for me, it came out in different ways. It started to paint a picture in different ways, and it painted a picture in my life through addiction, and we all know that addiction is very ugly, and that was the case in my life, but also, you know, suicidal thoughts. And I think, you know, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how to tell anybody. I couldn't explain why I felt the way I felt, because everybody thought I was supposed to be happy because I was playing in the NHL, and the reality is I wasn't. And so, you know, that's where I got, and thankfully I made the right choice to tell somebody, and they believed me, and I think them believing me was probably more important than me telling.
So I wonder how you really dug yourself out of that hole, because for some people, for a lot of people, it can be a cycle and you can get lost in that. Well,
I've been in recovery now for 19 years. That said, you know, my life started being complicated with the law. I was arrested, you know, when I was 16 for an impaired driving. Thank God I did not hurt anybody. You know, so that's where my life was. I mean, I was in long-term mental health hospitals, many different psych wards, 7 different treatment centers, high-end treatment centers. And that's what it took for me to get any type of recovery. So, you know, but recovery was, you know, the way I was looking at it before was, you know, I thought, well, you know, I'll maybe talk about, you know, some of the things. I'll make everybody happy that's around me, and I'll go to treatment. But the reality is, you know, I really needed to own my part. And what I mean by owning my part is that, you know, because I was hurt, and because I was hurt by Graham James, sexually abused by him. My father was, you know, I grew up in a very violent home as well. So, you know, I grew up running away from my feelings and running in a way that I didn't know how to. That was my way of you know, of expressing my hurt. And so, you know, I think at the end of the day, you know, I needed to really own the fact that, you know, because of the way I lived my life, because of the way that I was set up to live my life, I had wreckage in my past, which means, you know, I treated people, I had anger, I had a lot of fear. You know, my addiction didn't have me showing up at, you know, my daughter's birthday, things like that. And there was lots of that stuff. And, you know, I really needed to own that. And, you know, I really needed to understand that, you know, as much as other people played a huge part in the way that I was living my life and hurt me in a significant way, I did have a role. But I also learned, and you know, and I think, I had to hang around with people that had found a way out of this, that had found a way to live in recovery. And because, a lot of times, I think I had so many failures in my life. And even though I played in the NHL, I still felt like a failure because, I'd never lived, I never lifted a weight or rode a bike in my life. I'd never given myself a chance to be the best I could be. I was arrested, I was in treatment centers, and just every part of my life was a failure. So, 7 treatment centers and psych wards, you feel like a failure too, like I can't even get recovery right. So for me, I needed to hang around with people, and I needed to get to the point where, I did not know how to live in recovery. I knew nothing about it. And I had to really, just get to that humble, humiliating place to be able to start climbing that ladder, and it takes time.
I have lost friends to addiction as well, and when I was talking to them, close to losing them, they said the same thing. They said that they felt like a failure as well. If there is anybody watching this right now that may be in that spot, what is your advice to them to get out of that hole like you did?
Well, and I appreciate your honesty there. And I think, if anybody's watching this, I think, if there's a lesson to be learned is just don't give up. Like there was many times that I could have thrown in the towel. And I think, after 7 treatments, I want to get it. I want to get it. And I think, the people that I know, very few people ever get it the first time they try it. But you know what they do get? The seed is planted when they first admit the fact that, this is a problem in my life and I want something different. And we can't do it alone. And as heavy as that phone feels sometimes, whether it's 5,000 pounds or whatever, we need to find a way to pick it up. We need to find a way to ask for help. And I don't think we have to think that we have all the answers, because the reality is if we knew a lot about recovery, we'd already be living in it. But the reality is we need to ask for help, and just, we don't have to have the answers, just, be vulnerable. And take that risk to be vulnerable, and take that risk to trust, because those are 2 things that I think are critical to start the journey.
I know that, you have made it your mission really to help people that are struggling, and that is work that you are doing with the Respect Group. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the Respect Group came out of, I was Newsmaker of the Year in 1997 in our country, and I really felt to myself that I really haven't done anything. All I've done is told my story. So I looked at some of the other recipients over the past years, and there was Terry Fox and Rick Hansen, and I thought, well, I'm going to put a pair of rollerblades on and rollerblade across this country and try to have some conversations around issues that weren't real popular and were carried a significant amount of fear and worry and anxiety and stress. And so, one of the things that I think really I felt strongly about is that, what I learned on that journey is that prevention is our best is the best way to protect not only our communities, but our children and ourselves. I feel that perpetrators, whether it's sexual abuse or any forms of abuse, they prey upon communities' ignorance and indifference. And the more that we can build a confidence and a language and our ability to communicate in this space, the stronger we're going to be together. Because, when I grew up, I heard that, be careful of that white van that's cruising around town because they're going to get you. In a lot of the cases, we've done, thousands of child abuse investigations. I mean, 95% of the children, the victims know their abuser, and over 50% of those kids are abused by a parent or caregiver. So, stranger danger in a lot of cases, isn't always the case. So, our best defense is knowledge. Keep the eyes on those in front of us and making sure that we're communicating and we're out front, and this issue isn't hidden. And I think what we know is the impact is real. I mean, over 80% of adults in treatment centers and detox centers have disclosed early childhood abuse in their past. So, when we look at that and we see the destruction, that comes with it, Respect Group was critical, but we couldn't have done a good job with that unless, because I can't go out and talk to people about how to walk the walk and, how to live in recovery and how to get out of these ugly places unless I found a way out of it myself. And to me, that was critical. So living in recovery, you know, trying to do the right thing to, you know, make sure I wake up every day and make sure that, you know, I'm in a good spot so I can carry that message for others and show them that, you know, these things are possible. And keep it simple, right? To me, keep it simple. And yeah, I'm proud of Respect Group. I'm proud of what we've done, but never possible unless I got sober.
So that's just part of our wide-ranging conversation with Sheldon Kennedy. We'll have more of that coming up next hour. Well, just ahead, our chief correspondent and host of The National, Adrienne Arsenault, joins us live here in studio. She'll give us a preview of her Canadian exclusive interview with Ukraine's First Lady. And our weather specialist stops by to explain why scientists are raising alarms over the state of the Amazon. That's all coming up ahead here on Canada Tonight. Stick with us. Welcome back to Canada Tonight. We are just shy of 2 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. The war has captured so much of our attention over these past 700 days. And in a Canadian exclusive, our chief correspondent and host of The National, Adrienne Arsenault, spoke with Ukrainian First Lady Olena Zelenska for a conversation. Adrian joins us now. Hi, Adrian. This is, certainly a very big get. I know that you talked to the First Lady about what day-to-day life is like right now in Ukraine. What did she tell you?
So first thing she does, and I've seen her do it before, is she immediately defers to the life of other Ukrainians.
Right.
Acknowledges, listen, we have the privilege of security and we have shelters and we know we're very lucky. It's much harder for everyone else. But when you, and all of that is true, but when you get through that and you start talking about her life, you realize the extent to which it is governed by violence, governed by air raid sirens. Every schedule has a caveat, a little asterisk next to it. We will talk to you if the sirens don't go. And of course, the interview almost didn't happen because of that very thing, the air raid sirens that are everywhere. And so we had a conversation about how you deal with that. So I've been there and I've watched that experience where people are so tired, they go in 4 o'clock in the morning, that you make this strange little deal with the universe where you say, I'm probably gonna be okay. Even people who are lucky enough to have shelters to go to, because a lot don't, I'm just gonna sleep through. What are the chances? It'll be okay. And I asked her if she knew that fatigue, and as I was asking, she's nodding.
Yeah.
And have a listen, because she really gets that feeling.
Знаєте, це дійсно дуже є така втома.
There really is this fatigue, and these fatalistic thoughts keep coming, such as whatever happens, let it be, I can't take this anymore, but it's wrong. I feel a personal responsibility. I know that I have to be an example, not only for my kids, for my family. No matter how much we don't want to get dressed and go to the shelters at night, we have to do this because we understand, we realize that every air raid can be the last one, the fatal one.
So if you imagine living like that, right? It's hard for a few days at a time, but you're coming up to 2 years. So she's been very open about talking about the mental health toll of war and talking about her own experience. She said, I think we all have some sort of generalized anxiety disorder, meaning it's impossible to be calm. It's impossible to ever be distracted. Like nothing offers an escape. And I think the more she talks about it, the more you realize just how embedded this war has become in all of their lives.
Just on the edge all the time. I know that you got personal with her and you talked to her a little bit about her children and the impact that it's had on the family.
Yeah, I mean, Elena Zelenska is she's a comedy writer. She studied architecture, a very accomplished woman, regardless of being married to the president, right? And so she is a leader in that sense. And so she's very serious. And then when you ask about her kids, then her face changes and she smiles. She has 2 children, a little guy who is about 10 or 11 years old. Her daughter is 19, 20. And they have big dreams and big goals, and their childhood has been interrupted. They're growing up very fast. They don't spend a lot of time with their dad. She said you can't parent by phone, but that's sort of what's happening because they don't spend a lot of time together. She walks us through a little bit of what it's like.
Знову ж таки, наша родина.
Our family is not quite different from the Ukrainian families. Our situation is the same as the situation of the majority of us. Yes, we are separated. We can't be together all the time, but we do understand that this is the requirement of this difficult time, of a very horrifying period of our lifetime that we can't change, unfortunately. We are just trying to be patient. We are trying to squeeze all the positive emotions that we can get from every moment when we are all together. Of course, we miss peaceful family dinners when we don't have to keep the track of time.
And how's this for a mom to think about? Her daughter is studying international law. Her son wants to be a soldier. So she says, I'm proud of him. Yeah. Like all Ukrainian boys, he wants to fight, but I really hope that by the time he's old enough, he can protect Ukraine, but not have to fight it.
Just worried like every mother would be. Adrian, good to see you. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Not at all.
And Adrian will have that interview tonight on The National, right after this program. That's our chief correspondent and host of The National, Adrian Arsenault, joining us here in studio. Well, still ahead, a new study is looking at the impact of climate change on the worst drought on record in the Amazon rainforest. Our science reporter breaks it all down. And a conversation with Indigenous actor Tantu Cardinal amid a string of prominent figures claiming to have Indigenous ancestry. That is all coming up right here on Canada Tonight. Well, a couple from Nova Scotia whose flight was delayed took Air Canada to small claims court and they won. Brett Ruskin reports from Halifax with the details on their story.
This is a story that many airline passengers are probably familiar with. Unfortunately, delays and cancellations with airlines and airports. It involves Terry and Vicky Lynn Black, here from Nova Scotia, traveling back in July 2022 from Halifax to Toronto to New York City. The first leg of their journey went well, but then the second leg, Air Canada had to cancel that flight. They said it was due to COVID-19 reasons, said it wasn't their fault, and so they didn't want to pay out compensation for that delay. The trip eventually had them Air Canada transfer them to a Delta Airlines flight, which then was delayed as well. Delta offered them the chance to fly on American Airlines, an offer that they took. So they arrived about 7 hours late to their final destination, which should have made them eligible for $700 each in compensation, according to federal regulations. Now, Air Canada said that they were not eligible, that it wasn't their fault, and instead offered them a $300 e-coupon, basically gift certificate that they could spend on future Air Canada travel. So they weren't happy with that process. Here is Vicky Lynn talking about this process and what they were offered.
Honestly, in retrospect, it would have been way easier just to take the e-coupon, but the air passenger rights regulations clearly state that we're entitled to cash, that we're entitled to $700, and that there's no expiration.
And so the main takeaway here is that there are federal protections in place for passengers if their flights are delayed and canceled for reasons that are in the control of the major airlines. So if it's between 3 and 6 hours delayed, airline travelers are entitled to $400 each as a result of the compensation, $700 if those delays are greater than 6 hours in length. And if airlines don't comply, if they reject those claims and it's a reason that is in their control, as we've seen here, you can take the airlines to small claims court. So proof that the system does work. Brett Ruskin, CBC News, Halifax.
The Amazon forest is commonly referred to as the planet's lungs. Now, a new study suggests extreme weather is threatening the world's biggest carbon store there. Scientists found that the climate crisis has worsened the devastating drought in the Amazon rainforest. Our science and climate specialist, Darius Mohavdi, joins us now from Vancouver. So Darius, good to see you. First time chatting here on the new format for the show. Tell us a little bit more about this study and what they found.
It is a really devastating result, actually, because I don't know about you, Travis, but I didn't hear very much at all about the drought in the Amazon in 2023, and I'm fairly immersed in these things, but this was an exceptional drought. The study found that it was a 1 in 50 to 1 in 100 year event, so 1 in a century event. Some of the river levels throughout parts of the Amazon basin are at their lowest level in over 120 years, and based on the results of this study, this would be classified as an exceptional drought based on the United States Drought Monitoring System. So if you take a look at this map, you can see where we've had that drought, and just keep in mind that dark red color you see there, the D4, that means a drought that would only be expected to occur at best once in every 1 in 50 years. Now that means that it's in the top 2% of drought events ever recorded, and for many of these places it's actually the worst drought ever recorded. D3, the red areas that you see there, that means a top 5% of drought events, or we should say bottom 5%. Now in large part this is because of some really exceptionally low precipitation and really high temperatures. So if you take a look here, you can see based on pretty much any data set you look at, the authors found that it was the lowest precipitation amount ever recorded across the Amazon basin, and in terms of temperature, the highest temperatures ever recorded. Now, it's worth saying El Nino events do usually mean a drier and warmer season for the Amazon, but the authors found that even though the lack of precipitation was likely a combination of El Nino and climate change, these really high temperatures were almost entirely driven by human-caused climate change. So as we continue to warm the planet and emit fossil fuels, these drought events that are currently 1 in 50, 1 in 100 year events can be expected to occur once every 12 or 13 years. Okay, so Darius, the question is this reversible, and what does it mean for the future of the Amazon? For now, yes. Now, there is a situation in which the Amazon cannot recover. This is one of the major climate tipping points that scientists talk about. And now, the Amazon is really relies on the fact that it's really good at holding on to water. If rain falls over the Amazon, the trees soak it up and then emit it back into the atmosphere, and it falls on another part of the Amazon. So if you lose one part, or if one part's experiencing extreme drought, it really affects the entire forest, and we get what's called dieback. And because the Amazon is only 1% of the Earth's surface, but contains 10% of the world's biodiversity, it's really important that we prevent that dieback from happening. Unfortunately, we're still around 20 or 30 years away, scientists think, from that tipping point. So we have time. We just need to start to act.
Okay, Darius, good to see you for this first one. We're going to do a lot more of them. That is our science and climate specialist, Darius Madavi in Vancouver. All right, so yesterday we showed you part one of our conversation with Indigenous actor Tantu Cardinal. Now, we had some breaking news, of course, at the New Hampshire primary, and we weren't able to show you the second part. So we're going to do that right now. We left our conversation on the string of prominent people who have been claiming Indigenous ancestry. So here's part two of our conversation with Tantu Cardinal.
Go spend all their richness, all their incredible gifts that they have, that they can come and reap our fields. You know, go to your own world. Go there and be useful.
So when you saw the story about Buffy St. Marie come out, what did you think about it? What do you think about it?
I thought about the injustices that have occurred to Indigenous people throughout history, not just in North America, but all over the planet. You know, who are these people that figured that they're supposed to run the world? You know, get off it. You know, get over yourself. And so for me, it's another example, and I just hope that some people will wake up and realize that there's lies going on. There's misrepresentations happening. There's complete injustices going on. And for what purpose?
You know Buffy St. Marie.
Yes.
What would be your message to her?
Bad choice. Bad choice. It'd be nice if she would write, why did you do that? Because she's not the only one. And I'm hoping that if that big tree is toppled and we see the roots of what's underneath it, why she made that choice, it might be easier to get the other ones. Because there are other ones that have worked their ways into the bowels of Hollywood and academia and so many other places that, you know, maybe that she can make a treatise of that. She's PhD educated, many advantages, you know, write us that book. Whatever possessed her to do that. And you know, and something that we have to reconfigure is what does our music industry and all the other places that she put her hands on, what does it look like when it's not tampered with by people from the outside?
Cardinal makes no qualms about speaking her mind, and at 73, she's more than earned that right. These days, her passion for telling Indigenous stories has not faded. 3 decades after Dances with Wolves, her most recent project is also getting Oscar buzz.
My mother, Lizzie.
The epic Western crime drama Killers of the Flower Moon is directed by Martin Scorsese and stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro.
I was chosen. Scorsese was apparently aware of my work.
So no audition?
No audition. And so I was asked to be part of it. And my character, Lizzie Q, is part of the old world. And my work was all in Osage. So my work was with the Osage people who were the keepers of the language. And so it was a very positive place for me to spend my time.
Most Osage don't live past 50. With these women dying, with how Osage suffer from illness, you have to make it the head rights come to you.
What do you want Tantu Cardinal's legacy to be?
I want Tantu Cardinal's legacy to be successful in retelling of a story. And that's the direction that I'm going in now. I'm going to produce some stories. I haven't had the space and the confidence and the tools and to do it. And now I feel like, okay, there's a certain part of my life that's kind of done.
Sure.
And so I'm going to...
Next chapter.
I'm going to start in a new direction and see what I can do.
Thank you so much.
Thank
it's been
you.
a pleasure.
Thank you. Yes, it has.
Canadian actress Tantu Cardinal there in the Canada Tonight Spotlight. So we were just talking about the Oscars and the Oscar buzz around her movie, Killers of the Flower Moon. But despite box office success, there were a couple of major Oscar snubs for the Barbie movie, and one prominent actor is not happy about it. Ontario native Ryan Gosling earned a supporting actor nomination for his role as Ken, but his co-star Margot Robbie and the movie's director Greta Gerwig did not. Gosling said this: "I am extremely honored to be nominated by my colleagues alongside such remarkable artists in a year of so many great films. But there is no Ken without Barbie, and there is no Barbie movie without Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie, the two people most responsible for this history-making, globally celebrated film." The Barbie movie earned a total of 8 nods, including Best Picture. Be interesting to see if he wins what his speech is like. Well, listen to this. A lucky New Brunswick couple has successfully chased the ace. The jackpot reached more than $8 million and is thought to be the largest of its kind in the country. Marianne Domain walks us through how it all unfolded.
Danny and Muriel Robbins of Beresford, New Brunswick, now $8.2 million richer. For 48 weeks, people have been trying to chase the ace, but this New Brunswick couple managed to catch that elusive ace of hearts, and this is the moment when it exactly happened. Their ticket was pulled from a pile of more than 750,000 tickets. They were given a call and then told to pick a card, and they picked correctly. Our cameras were there last night as they processed the news that they are now millionaires.
It is, you know.
I was screaming.
Yeah, so the phone started ringing, you know, and she was screaming, and so I couldn't hear what Levy was hardly telling me, and you know, it seemed so far-fetched. So we'll sit down and we'll figure it out. We'll try to, yeah.
So they've got some time to decide exactly how they plan to spend this money, but they did say that they plan to split their winnings with their son and his girlfriend because they played this all together. Now again, the odds of even being called in the first place quite high. There were more than 750,000 tickets in that pool, so not only were they chosen, they also chose number 2. That number 2 card is where that Ace of Hearts was hiding, and now they have that giant check that they can take right to the bank. They've got a lot of time to think about this too. Muriel is actually retired. Danny's still working, but he says today, jokingly, he will likely take a sick day while they continue to process what they've now won. As for the Chase the Ace, it is now officially over for now. Organizers are saying they're going to take the time to rest. So many of them are volunteers, but they do plan to potentially start it back up in the next few weeks, maybe in the next few months. But the key takeaway here is everyone seems to be winning here because the money from the Chase the Ace goes back into the community. Many businesses also benefited from the fact that people were coming from all over, not only New Brunswick, but also from the United States and out of province, because you had to be in New Brunswick in order to buy one of the tickets to be eligible to win this prize. Consolation prizes in the past have been up to $400,000. So that's why they think this was so popular. Marianne Domain, CBC News, Toronto.
All right, headed toward the top of the hour, and coming up next hour, we'll have, of course, your top stories, but we'll also have our intersection panel where they weigh in on the interest rate, Canada's health care in a new poll, and also Tucker Carlson meeting with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. All right, top of the clock. It is 8 p.m. in Quebec City, 6 p.m. in Whitehorse, and 9 p.m. in Charlottetown. This is Canada Tonight. Bombshell in the hockey world. The Globe and Mail reports that 5 former Canadian World Junior hockey players are being told to surrender to police. Our Sarah Galashan is standing by with a live update. The Bank of Canada holds interest rates at 5%. We'll hear from the chief economist at the Desjardins Group. And a new era for Canadian Paralympians. Para-athletes will be financially rewarded for medals they win at this summer's Paralympic Games in Paris. We'll have more on that. But once again, this hour, we start off with that news hitting the hockey world hard right now. The Globe and Mail is reporting that 5 former Canadian World Junior hockey players are being told to surrender themselves to London police. The Globe and Mail reports that the pending charges are in connection to an alleged group sexual assault of a young woman in a London hotel room in 2018. Sarah Galashan has been tracking this story for us. She joins me. So Sarah, police, as we said, not confirming these charges. Let's talk about what we know at this hour.
Travis, well, as of this hour, still silent are the NHL and Hockey Canada, their social media channels. There's been nothing posted about this headline that is circulating right now. And as for the London Police Service, we're hearing from them that they likely won't be commenting on this investigation for almost another 2 weeks, and that's according to a press release / social media post that they put out that acknowledges that there is significant public interest related to a sexual assault investigation that goes all the way back to 2018. They say that they anticipate being able to share details of that investigation at a press conference, but that press conference is not going to be held until Monday, February 5th. So that's a good deal of time. Of course, it was a significant public interest that really led to the London police reopening what was a closed investigation into sexual assault. And they reopened it in 2022 as allegations came to light, and it came to light that Hockey Canada had settled a lawsuit that was brought forth by a civil lawsuit by an unnamed female against 8 unnamed players, Hockey Canada and the National Hockey League. And that lawsuit was filed for more than $3.5 million. We don't know the amount that it was settled for outside of court, but the fact that it was settled, that led to a lot of questions about the way this nonprofit Hockey Canada handles allegations of sexual assault, and the answers to those questions, or in some cases the lack of answers to those questions, led to sponsors severing ties, and as well Hockey Canada's board and top executives, you'll remember, being completely replaced. Travis?
Yeah, and Sarah, you know, there have been a number of media organizations that have really dug into this story, including the CBC's Fifth Estate, in terms of the nature of the allegations. What do we know about what police are exactly investigating here?
Well, based on the woman's statement of claim, and as well as court filings that have since been unsealed, we know that the unnamed woman alleges that she met a player in June 2018 at a London bar, and this was following a hockey fundraiser that had been happening in the city of London. That the two drank alcohol and they went back to a hotel room, that there was consensual sex that occurred, but subsequently to that, a bit of a time later, a number of other players entered the room, and that's when it's alleged that there was a group sexual assault that took place, that there was video taken in which the woman is asked if she's okay. She is also in that video apparently seen wiping her eyes, slurring her words, and also as part of these court documents, we've learned that there were text messages going back and forth urging her to be silent, essentially, to make things go away. We do not know the name of any of those players who were accused. What we know is that they were members of Canada's gold medal winning 2018 World Juniors hockey team, that they played at an elite level in Canada, and we know from that roster that there are members who were part of that team that have gone on to continue to play at an elite level. And so that's why I say we continue to watch those social media channels of the NHL, of Hockey Canada, and certainly await word as to what the London police might have to say on February 5th. Travis.
Okay, and of course we will come back to you if we get any further update on that. That is our Sarah Galashan live in Vancouver for us tonight. Well, the other big story that we're tracking tonight, no rate hikes, no debt relief, just status quo from the Bank of Canada today. The central bank announced it is sticking with its key overnight lending rate of 5%. Governor Tiff Macklem was asked when we might see rates go down. Here's what he said.
You know, our deliberations are shifting from whether we've done enough to how long we hold. But there was a clear consensus. It's premature to be discussing cutting our policy rate. We need to see more progress before we have that discussion.
Well, this is the fourth time, that is, in a row that the rate has remained unchanged. Economists widely predicted it. At least two major banks are now saying June is when we might see some relief on mortgages and other borrowing costs. For more, we are joined now by Jimmy Jean. He is Vice President, Chief Economist, and Strategist at the Desjardins Group, and he is in our Montreal studio today. Good to see you, Mr. Jean. So I want to start with your reaction to the Bank of Canada's decision here to maintain this key overnight interest rate at 5%. Why do you think the bank has done this?
Well, for sure, it was expected that they would maintain the rate at 5%. And yeah, they've been threatening the possibility to hike rates further for many months, but nobody really believed in that threat. So now today they pulled that reference in the statement to the possibility of further hikes. And really the discussion now is about when is it going to be time to cut interest rates. And I think that goes down to is the disinflation trend at risk? And right now they feel they're not comfortable with what they've seen so far. They feel that the trend has stalled, which is true. So that's why we're not comfortable yet to entertain rate cuts. But my sense is that in the upcoming months, given what we've seen on the economic side of things, economic activity, I think the case will get more compelling in view of rate cuts starting in April.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that, because so many Canadians right now are squeezed by this. They are feeling the pinch, and it is hurting them in the pocketbook every single day. And many economists were predicting that interest rate cuts would come in 2024. When do you think we'll see that? And let's talk about some of those factors that you were talking about there that might lead to this change.
Well, yeah, the Bank of Canada has a mandate to control inflation around the 2% target. Right now, inflation is at 3.4%. So, granted, it is too high. But, what reduces inflation, and the Bank of Canada's playbook to reduce inflation is those high interest rates and that steamroller, really, which is those mortgage renewals. By its own calculation, when everything is said and done, the average borrower will face a payment shock of 34%. That's pretty significant, and that causes people to cut back on other expenses. And that's why, despite that historic demographic growth pace, you are seeing an economy that's pretty much stalled, as they indicate. So that's the process by which this works. I mean, it's going to come in ebbs and flows, so that's got to be expected. But I think at a certain point, the Bank of Canada has to trust the process. The process is working. We're seeing it. Everything outside of shelter has slowed down quite a bit in 2023, and if anything, it's going to continue in 2024. So, we think that means 6 rate cuts in 2024. We're going to have the year ending at 3.5%, which is still way higher than what we used to know before the pandemic.
And let's talk about before the pandemic, because as you said, current interest rates now are very different. Why is there such a difference? And let's talk about what that was.
Well, you've had various supply shocks internationally, for sure. But also domestically. I think what we've seen, it started really with respect to the supply chains, the fact that a good portion of the economy was closed down. So, consumers had only a limited choice in terms of their consumption, and that created those pressures. On top of that, we had that very strong, more lately, very strong immigration and population growth, and that's created some strains in the housing market and rentals in particular. So, that's been the genesis of that very high inflation. But, we're, 3/4 done here in terms of bringing back inflation to 2%. We were at 8%. Now we're 3.5%. So, it's going to take another while, but I don't think it means the Bank of Canada needs to be at 2% or for there to be a confirmed, sealed recession to begin the process. The earlier you begin, it affords you to, cut down very progressively without, having that knee-jerk sort of pattern where you create just more volatility into the economy.
Do you see any situation where we see interest rates go up yet again?
That would be very surprising at this stage because you're seeing a slowdown in inflation, not just in Canada, but just about everywhere. Many of those supply shocks or supply constraints have eased. Yes, we're talking about what's happening in the Red Sea, but before that, all those logistical challenges, they had been pretty much solved, and the issues in the Red Sea might get solved fairly quickly. Nobody really knows at this point, but the essential point here is that the unemployment rate is going up, the economy is slowing. The Bank of Canada said that the economy is now in a state of excess supply, and when that happens, that's disinflationary. So there's no reason at this time, given where we are with a very restrictive still monetary policy, to hike rates further. Really, the question is really how long to wait before starting the process, and how rapid those interest rate cuts, when they do arrive, how rapid should they be?
And it can't come soon enough for so many Canadians right across this country. Jimmy, thanks for your time tonight. That is Jimmy Jean. He is Vice President and Chief Economist and Strategist for the Desjardins Group. The head of Boeing Airlines met with U.S. senators in Washington today, and it comes after a cabin panel in one of its 737 MAX 9 jets blew out mid-flight earlier this month. Take a look.
We fly safe planes. We don't put airplanes in the air that we don't have 100% confidence in. I'm here today in the spirit of transparency.
So Boeing CEO is briefing U.S. senators in a series of meetings. The Alaska Airlines flight carrying 177 people was forced to make an emergency landing in Portland, Oregon. The cabin panel on the plane detached shortly after takeoff, leaving a gaping hole in the side of the plane. Nobody was killed or seriously injured. The FAA, that is, says the Boeing 737 MAX 9 planes can return to service once they go through inspection and a maintenance process. All right, after the break, we'll meet at the intersection tonight. Our panel digs into the latest on our top story, the scandal facing the hockey world tonight, plus money for medals, a game-changing moment for Canadian Paralympians. And later this hour, more of our Spotlight interview with former NHLer Sheldon Kennedy, who weighs in on the league's latest program meant to tackle players' mental health. You're watching Canada Tonight. And welcome back to Canada Tonight. Revisiting our top story tonight, the Globe and Mail is reporting that 5 members of the 2018 Canadian World Junior Hockey team have been ordered to surrender themselves, that is, in a London, Ontario, police to face sexual assault charges. The report says the charges are connected to the alleged assault of a woman after a fundraising event in 2018. Now, the CBC has not independently verified these facts. London police have not commented on the case, but say they expect to hold a press conference on February 5th. All right, time for the Intersection panel now, part of the show where we unpack some of the hot topics trending in Canada tonight and give you a range of perspectives. Meeting at the intersection, Riley Yesno, an Indigenous rights advocate, and writer, Kari Vierma, a senior associate at KPW Comms, a communications firm, and Mitzi Hunter, a former Liberal MPP, as well as the former education minister for the province of Ontario. Okay, guys, good to see all of you. Let's start with the big top story today, and that is the news out of the hockey world. Mitzi, do you think that these players having to surrender to police is going to send shockwaves through the hockey world and perhaps change the culture that exists right now?
I think it already has. I think the shockwaves are rippling around the world for what this alleged situation is unfolding, and the fact that it's coming out of our London, Ontario community, and the London police are looking into laying charges. This is very serious. You know, I have to tell you, Travis, when I read this story and what the allegations are, it really turned my stomach. You know, we are such a long way from the Me Too movement having sort of set that standard, and to see that this, you know, type of alleged behavior could have happened, you know, it just really says to me that the culture has to change, both within the hockey system, but also within the police system. And when someone says that something's happened, we have to take that seriously, and we have to do the investigation that is now starting to happen.
And I mean, it did take some time, and still, you know, police have not confirmed these charges, but we understand that there's going to be this news conference on February the 5th. Kari, let me get your thoughts on this and what the reverberations will be.
Yeah, and I think what's really frustrating to me is still the lack of transparency, both on the part of London police, who by all reports dropped the ball in the initial investigation, and also from Hockey Canada to this day. You know, look at the statements from the NHL, these various players who were part of that initial junior hockey team, who are now all taking indefinite leaves of absence for various reasons, some citing mental health, some citing other things. Is it really appropriate, if these are indeed the individuals who may end up facing charges in the next few weeks, for the NHL to be saying, oh yes, it's because of mental health? Like, the whole hockey culture needs to get significantly more transparent. And unfortunately, what we've seen today is further opaqueness at a time where trust in the hockey establishment continues to be at an all-time low.
Okay, so Riley, does this give you hope or not, like Kari?
I mean, I hate to be the cynic, but no, I think one of the things that I think about for bad behavior like sexual assault, right, is that they know that there can be jail time for that when they're doing sexual assault. Oftentimes we don't see like harsher punishments actually mitigating harm in the way that we think it was. We see this with policing. I don't see why we wouldn't see it with something like this. I think instead, like zooming out from this specific case a little bit, what it takes to change the culture of hockey in Canada is, yes, the institutional investigations and overhauls and making changes that way, but also, like, I grew up in small town hockey town, like Thunder Bay, Ontario, right? And that is how we allow, speaking derogatorily of women or you know, the culture of misogyny is something that's ingrained in every local club, in every city in this country. It's something that we allow for locker room talk, that we call women who show up at the thing puck bunnies. And so, you know, it's, yes, a top level institutional problem, but it's also a very interpersonal micro level problem that we also have to address.
So what are we doing to make that not the culture, and to say to others who perhaps have been exposed to that type of behavior, to say it's actually safe and okay to come forward. And I think that that's the challenge that the new board and CEO Catherine Henderson have to confront, is that in order to change the culture, you have to face the culture, and you have to make it okay for people to safely come forward with some of the experiences that they might have had.
And Kari, what about the people that say within the hockey world, this is about individuals, it's not about sport?
If it was, then, if the allegations are true, why didn't any other member of that junior hockey team speak up and speak publicly, or raise it up to the appropriate concerns? You've seen this in the NHL with misconduct allegations within certain teams, that there is this culture of silence. Boys will be boys. Has there ever been more of a toxic term to be used to say, oh, it's okay for men to behave terribly? And that's the thing. They were men. And that's the thing that's really, you have individuals who are being given an indeterminate amount of time to surrender to police. Question to those at home. If it was you who was accused of this, do you think the police service would give you that same opportunity? Why is it that these presumably NHL stars are being given this pretty long runway to come surrender to police?
Okay. We got to move on to topic 2, and that is about the healthcare system in this country right now. A new poll is showing that most Canadians do not think the quality of healthcare will improve with the staffing shortage right across the country. Doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals have warned for years about the impact of primary care across the country. Okay, let's get you guys to dig in on this. And I know you were in the legislature here in Ontario. Healthcare, a big topic in this province, and as we know, right across the country. What do you make of the results of this polling?
I'm not surprised. We know, and we've known for years, that there's going to be a gray tsunami that is going to hit this country when it comes to demand for healthcare services. And at a time when our population is aging, we see actually a decline in our healthcare system. Emergency rooms are closing. Can you imagine an emergency room that has scheduled hours? How do you determine that? We see certain professions in the healthcare system, like nursing, that is losing some of its most experienced individuals, and we cannot replace them fast enough. We cannot actually replace that level of experience fast enough, even though we're investing in training. And so the federal government has worked out a deal with all of Canada's premiers. I believe everyone has signed in principle, except for Quebec, a $196 billion new healthcare accord. But the challenge for our system is that we must innovate. We cannot actually solve this and meet the challenges for healthcare with the same old, same old.
So, okay, let me ask you this, Riley. Innovation, going back to Ontario, the Premier has been talking about efficiencies and, use of private facilities for public care. What do you make of that model? And to Mitzi's point, do we have to innovate in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that we have to innovate, and I think like the asterisk star beside that is always that innovating costs money, implementing costs money, and so turning, the Ford government is saying maybe it's not such a bad idea to privatize some parts of this, is really passing the buck on that necessity. That is the clear way forward, I think. Privatization to me, and the conversation that I'm seeing happen around it more and more frequently over the last year or so is really scary. I think that if you talk to any nurse, any doctor, anybody who works in the healthcare system right now, they have tons of ideas and can tell you exactly what they need. They need to be paid better. They need more staff. They need people to get out of emergency rooms by being able to provide home care, expanding dental care, pharmacare, all of those other things to relieve the burden on emergency rooms. The solutions are there. I think what really needs to happen next then is the political will and the willing to open up the pockets to be able to make that happen.
But just on the point of the money piece, though, we are on an unsustainable track on spending in healthcare. And I believe this was when you were in government. There were reports that, by the end of this decade, governments will be spending upwards of 70 cents on every dollar of revenue on healthcare. That means less money for roads, less money for education, less money for social services. So it goes back to this fundamental of innovation. One thing I will give the Ford government credit for, there's not much I'd give them credit for, but this idea of getting rid of the local health integration networks, getting rid of the CCACs, creating holistic 360 healthcare through Ontario health teams. That's in its infancy in this province, but that has the opportunity to truly transform healthcare by reducing bureaucracy and making sure that you're getting the proper wraparound care earlier on, which means less clogged emergency rooms, less hallway medicine. But with this government, as much as we've seen, sometimes the ideas are good, but the implementation not as much.
This is a debate not just in this province, right across the country. Wearing my other hat when I was the marketplace host, I did a story on the healthcare system. We went out to BC. We looked at what is being done there with some private clinics doing, cataract surgeries and knee surgeries and things like that. Why is that not an option?
Yeah, and when I talk about innovation, sure, you can deliver differently and you can use technology to do that, but that has to affect the cost as well, and where you're putting emphasis. And and part of one of the things that I hear all the time from family doctors is that they're spending a lot of time on administration and paperwork and not on patient care. So can we use technology in the system to take away some of that demand and really focus on actually doing things that help people live well in this country?
So, I mean, when we hold our healthcare system up to the United States and we take pride in our healthcare system, which it seems like less people are doing now, what do you think of that comparison to the U.S. and where we stand kind of in the world? Kari, I'll go to you.
Look, the challenge is our healthcare system, like so much of our public institutions, is in crisis. From 30 years of below inflationary spending increases, staffing crisis, as you correctly pointed out, Mitzi, and a lack of innovation, as you correctly pointed out, Riley. We need to get smarter, not just open up a blank checkbook. And when it comes to the comparison to the United States, the reality is if you get hit by a car in this country, you won't go bankrupt. The same can't be said in the United States.
Okay, we got to go to a break. We're going to be back after the break to talk about the interest rate staying the same and also Tucker Carlson and Danielle Smith meeting in Alberta. That's going to be an interesting one. Intersection is back on Canada Tonight, coming up in 2. welcome back to the Canada Tonight intersection. Our next topic, the Bank of Canada announced today its key interest rate is staying the same at 5%. Here's the Bank of Canada Governor, Tiff Macklem.
But tightness in some parts of the economy is continuing to hold inflation up. The most prominent of these is housing. Inflation in shelter services remains high, close to 7%, because of rising mortgage interest costs, higher rents, and other housing costs. And while food prices are not increasing as fast as they were, food price inflation is still about 5%.
Okay, Riley, Kari, Mitzi joining us at the intersection to discuss this and Canada's economy. Riley, I'm going to start with you. What do you make of this decision? And, you know, as we have been talking about on the show, and just in general, for it feels like forever, Canadians are getting squeezed more and more, and they thought they were going to get some relief here. It doesn't look like that for a little bit at least.
Yeah, I feel like maybe it's that they hope they were getting some relief. From what I understand from folks who are more tuned into conversations about the economy than I am, that they say that this was pretty much expected. That it seems like, at least for now, going higher is off the table, and that this is supposed to be the year of going down. But obviously that is TBD. I think regardless of what is coming out from the Bank of Canada right now, what is like an undeniable reality is that we are in an affordability crisis. That people are feeling it. I talk to other young people and they're like, are we in a recession? Why does it feel like we are, even if we're not, right? And so that is something that, is there's no silver bullet to fixing that. There's a bunch of policy options I think we need to be pursuing in order to address that. But also increasingly, I want to bring up that I'm getting nervous where I see increasingly dangerous rhetoric around who is to blame for this affordability crisis. We see immigrants, international students blamed for things like the housing crisis, for strains on healthcare, and I think it's a really dangerous rhetoric that we're beginning to dip our toes more and more into, instead of looking at some of the other causes, I think, which are major property investors who own, however many things and skyrocket rent.
Yeah.
Like, that is more of where I'd like to see the conversation going and whose feet we're holding to the fire, and I don't know if we're doing that just the right way yet.
Well, this is also going to be a big political issue. The House is resuming tomorrow, obviously, and as you say, blame is being tossed around, and it's probably going to likely is going to go by the opposition leader to Justin Trudeau when the House resumes next week. Talk to us about this from a political perspective, Kari.
Yeah, look, Pierre Poilievre's messaging of axe the tax has been largely effective, and public opinion polling has shown that. The cost of living crisis lands at the foot of this current government. They were slow to act on issues of housing. They were slow to act on issues of affordability. I'll remind audiences, Pierre Poilievre was talking about inflation and the threat of it well before even the Bank of Canada was. Right. Sometimes does he play fast and loose on the economic arguments? Sure, but he's not wrong about that. And I think that's going to be the real challenge for the Prime Minister. François-Philippe Champagne, those meetings were great, summoning the grocery store execs to Ottawa, demanding them to come up with a plan to stabilize pricing. Food prices are 5% higher year over year at this point. Yeah. And the thing to remember with inflation, we want inflation to go down, but that doesn't mean your grocery prices are going down. That just means that they're not going up as high as they were before.
Okay, let me get the reaction to that from a Liberal. What do you make of that? Because it doesn't look like we're going to see relief, at least right now in the very short term, in terms of these interest rates.
Well, good news today is that the interest rates are not going up. They're staying the same.
It doesn't really help
people
right now.
They're staying the same. And also, the Bank of Canada removed the line that was threatening to increase interest rates. So that's also a good sign as well as it goes. They keep their cards very, very close to the chest
thinking, yes.
and very tight. At the same time, that's not the entire picture, right? Tiff Macklem talked about the stickiness of inflation when it comes to things like high rents and housing prices in terms of mortgage rates. And it's much more difficult to control those things when you have the demand for housing so high and the supply not meeting that demand. And so Canadians are feeling it. And Riley, you talk about how young people are feeling like, are we in a recession? Well, we're not, we're not in a recession per se from the technical standpoint, but it's the economy is slowing and slowing and slowing, and it's that slow growth of the economy that is helping to modulate when it comes to inflation. I am not really sure I have ever seen Pierre Poilievre predict this, because inflation is something that all countries around the world. It's a global phenomenon. And it's not Canada's alone. In fact, Canada and its aggressive policies have actually helped to, control this issue as best as possible. So, I wouldn't give him more credit than he deserves.
And that's fair, but you look at the issue of housing and the stickiness of increasing costs of living for that. Federal government has known for years that there is a shortage of housing stock in this country. Despite that, they woke up this summer and realized we're in a housing crisis. Yeah. The three of us live in the GTA. You represented the riding of Scarborough-Guildwood. Yes. I'm sure you know that we've been in a housing crisis for almost a decade in this city. Yeah. How is it that federal Liberals didn't realize that? That's why they're getting hammered so much at the polls, because they go and tell Canadians every day, everything is great, don't you worry. All right, when in reality, it couldn't be further from that at this moment.
Somebody I think that would agree with you on that point is Tucker Carlson, and he is our final topic, because he met with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith today. And let's take a look at what he had to say.
It's Tucker Carlson calling from the United States, and I'd be grateful if you pass a message on to the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. We are coming to liberate Canada. We are coming to liberate Canada.
All right, we're coming to liberate Canada. So that actually wasn't from his meeting with Danielle Smith. That was as in his lead up to come to Canada, to Calgary. And full transparency, he called me and said that he actually watched the show. So he might be watching right now. But what do you make of the Alberta Premier saying that she, is going to meet with Tucker Carlson, met with him, and to a very big crowd, I will say, as well?
Well, I would say he needs the ratings. She does not.
I don't think he needs the ratings, though. His ratings are really high.
Well, he seems like he's hungry for more. And, I would say to Danielle Smith, Premier Danielle Smith, she doesn't need that. She's got to focus on things here, let the Americans sort out themselves, and not bring that kind of rhetoric here in Canada. We do not need more division in this country. We actually need to be working very, very hard at bringing people together so that we can actually work on the things that we face in common.
So he's in Edmonton tonight. He was in Calgary earlier today, and there was a big crowd, and there's likely going to be a very big crowd tonight as well. Thousands of people, Kari. So, I mean, what do you think about that?
Almost 20,000 people paid good money and was reading tickets upwards of $200.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 9,000 and 8,000 in each respective city. Right. But I agree with you 100% if we're talking about the relationship of the Tucker Carlson types.
What does that mean, though? What does the Tucker Carlson type mean? Because, I mean...
It's a form of conservatism that's being imported from the United States. It's an easy win for Danielle Smith because the United Conservative Party coalition in Alberta requires you to keep that part of the party, which is an ever-growing part of the party, under the tent. Because when they divided, that's when you got an NDP government in Alberta. But it's a cautionary tale to federal conservatives in this country. If you continue to go down the Tucker Carlson route, the World Economic Forum route, the anti-United Nation, anti-globalization route, you are not going to win in ridings like Scarborough-Guildwood, like Mississauga Lakeshore, like Surrey, like Richmond, the ridings that conservatives need to win to defeat Justin Trudeau in the next election.
But for an Alberta premier who's not looking at the entire country, she's looking at Alberta. And I'm sure she's talked to strategists about this. I mean, she didn't make this decision by herself.
I don't know. She tends to go rogue.
But I mean, is it not politically astute? I mean, if it is, as Kari said, attractive to a large proportion of people that are likely to vote for her that are also fans of Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be my move, but I mean, she seems to have at least, in her mind, there is something strategically advantageous about this. And part of it, I think, I saw people commenting, does this mean that she has the same politics as him? And I'm like, who cares? It means she's okay with that being a question, right? And with that being a part of of people's thinking about her. And so I get really nervous when I see, to Kari's point about this importation of a specific type of conservatism that I think is extremist, is really flirting with conspiracy theories, far-right conspiracy theories, and that I just don't think it's good for democracy there, certainly, and I don't want it here either. And so on that end, I think it's obviously, yikes. At the same time, however, I wonder if this, hopefully, and I see this as big red warning lights, that maybe especially with the, step down of Rachel Notley on the NDP, that hopefully maybe this is some fire for the left in Alberta to organize and try and create narrative, try and create leaders that can speak to these sort of events and the danger that they pose and a lack of judgment, perhaps. I think that could be fuel for them if they're organized and if they're strategic about it. So we'll see if they take that opportunity.
Well, I mean, what does it signal about, what is going on in the country beyond Alberta? And do you think other premiers would do something like this, like a Conservative premier in this province, perhaps, Doug Ford? I mean, certainly, when his brother was the mayor of Toronto, he called in some interesting celebrities into the mayor's office to give him a little boost.
I just can't see it playing well in Ontario. I mean, it's a dog whistle when you think about, the types of things that he espouses. Like, I don't think it's politics. I think it's just values that are just, really wrong. And right now in this country, we talked about a lot of things tonight: the economy, healthcare, housing, all of these things. We need our politicians to be working together, and we need to bring people together, not divide us even further.
Last point to you, Kari, because then we got to run because I'm at 0 on that clock. But doesn't he kind of represent, Tucker Carlson, like freedom of speech? And like, are we? Is she? Signaling that she is for that. Not just speech that you don't like, just freedom of speech in general.
No, I think Danielle Smith plays an effective role at nodding to the far right of the United Conservative Party that she's one of you, right? She isn't really ideologically, but she winks to them, and this is an easy win for her to solidify her base in Alberta. And I think to your point about galvanizing the left, it's really important to point out the last election in Alberta was a 7-seat swing for the UCP. So it's not like support for the left isn't there.
This is a really big wink.
Guys, we are out of time, and we are past time, I think, as well. Come back again. That is our intersection panel tonight. Riley Yesno, an Indigenous rights advocate, and writer Kari Vierma, senior associate at KPW Comms, and Mitzi Hunter, a former Liberal MPP, as well as the former Minister of Education here in Ontario. You're watching Canada Tonight. We'll be back after the break. And welcome back to Canada Tonight for part 2 of our Spotlight conversation with Sheldon Kennedy. We heard last hour from the former NHLer about his history of overcoming abuse and addiction. Here's the rest of our conversation. The NHL Players Association announced this First Line program. It's meant to support mental health of players and families as well. What do you make of the program, and how much progress do you think has been made when it comes to talking about this issue within the league?
I think it's a great start. And, I think it's available. I think when I hear this, I think what's important about this is acknowledgement. There's an acknowledgement that, that these NHL players, which, in a lot of young people's minds and within the fan base, look at, most, professional athletes, not just in hockey or, movie stars or, people that wear capes, and they don't struggle in the space. And I think so it was key to acknowledge it. I think that the other piece is that, it's about being available to all players. I think that we can do a better job. And I think, as we evolve, I think the NHL, or not just the NHL, but I think that, in sports in general, I think that they can do a better job at making sure that the message is resonating with those that are just starting the game, those below them, and I think that is huge because, they are the ones, those leagues and those players, they are the ones that are in a lot of these kids' minds, the ones that they're listening to. And so, to me, about acknowledging it at a union, at a PA level, but also at an NHL level, at a league level, and to be able to communicate that message, I think is probably the next step and a critical step because, as we all know, Travis, addiction is, riddling our streets, our communities, people's lives, most importantly, families, and and so is mental health. And to me, I don't differentiate addiction and mental health. I think it's all one. And at the end of the day, if we want to get better in this, if we're impacted this way, we need to be able to practice it. We need to be able to prioritize it. And, I think my mental health, my, just living in recovery, if I don't make it my number one priority in my life, I know where it takes me. I won't have any of the good things that I have in my life. I've got 2 young children today, a beautiful a partner, and, and a life that I can, enjoy and smile again. And those are the gifts of recovery that we can't lose sight of.
Toxic masculinity and, breaking down kind of bro culture or locker room culture and the locker room code is something that you've also talked about. Do you think that is happening in hockey? And if it is, do you think it's happening fast enough?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think, Travis, when we look at all of these, I think there's a huge amount, there's many issues that encompass, I believe, culture. And yes, we have to address them all, and I've talked about it a lot. I've talked about systemic culture, and I believe that, yes, there is a systemic culture there. And I think, it doesn't rely on any individual. I think what happens is that there's been a culture that's been built over many, many generations. And unless there's action, unless there's a intentional shift, and an intentional practice on a daily basis to change that culture, it's never going to change. So, I think that, when we look at these issues, and the way that I've talked about them anyway, is that, number one, we have to accept the fact that the culture that is in front of us, that we're in right now, needs to change. Yeah. And to me, how do you go about that? Well, Rome wasn't built overnight. But, if we go back to mental health and recovery, it's about acceptance. And I think that's the number one. So, if we can accept the fact that, okay, this is where we're at. And I think there's been pieces of it, but I don't believe, and I'm not quite sure it's 100% believed. But I think, if we can get to that point, I think then we can start chipping away at all of the issues that are critical to creating a healthy culture, and making sure that everybody feels that they belong, and that everybody feels that they're a part of something, and then we can enjoy the way forward. But I think until we get to that point, I don't think that we are going to grow the game the way that we all expect it to grow.
Yeah. And I know that you're going to be continuing to work on many of these fronts. I can't let you go without asking you about this season. Some Canadian teams doing really well right now, Winnipeg, Vancouver. What are your predictions?
Well, I am a Manitoba guy, and I know Mark Chipman, and he was one of the leaders, and he came out after the incident that was the pressure that was on after the Chicago incident, and was one of the leaders in bringing respect to the NHL, respect hockey, and that whole initiative. So I'm cheering for them. I think they need a winning season in that province for all their fans and for that team. So go Jets right now.
Go Jets right now. All right, Sheldon Kennedy, listen, right now. All right, we will see.
Hey, you like that? They kind of left an opening there, right?
He left an opening, indeed.
Yeah.
Sheldon Kennedy from my hometown of Calgary, Alberta. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Travis.
All right, so Sheldon Kennedy there in our spotlight, and we're going to have much more in the days ahead with various conversations, interesting people, and here's who we've got tomorrow who's going to take you to the moon and back.
Hello, I'm Colonel Jeremy Hansen. Stick around for my conversation with Travis coming up on Canada Tonight.
So we don't only talk about the Artemis II mission, but we also talk in general about his thoughts on the commercialization of space. And also we talk about his growing up on a farm as well, and how he takes that experience now that he learned as a kid to being an astronaut. Well, in other news, Canadian Paralympians will be financially rewarded for medals they win at the Paralympic Games in Paris this summer. It means they're eligible for the same amount of money as Olympic athletes. Olivia Stefanovic has the details.
No matter how many medals Tyler McGregor won, the reward was never equal to his Olympic counterparts. Now that's changing.
You're not making a whole lot of money doing this. And so I think for any Paralympian, it allows you to focus on what you can do right now to be your best.
We are absolutely thrilled, delighted to announce today the Paralympic Performance Recognition Program.
Starting this summer, Canadian Paralympians will be given the same amount of money as Olympic athletes for making the podium at the 2024 Paralympic Games and each of the games after.
It is proof how much Paralympic sport has grown.
$20,000 for winning gold, $15,000 for silver, and $10,000 for bronze.
For me personally, it's a huge motivator.
Paralympic silver medalist Priscilla Gagné says the money helps, but this is about being treated fairly.
People see you differently. You're not as valued as maybe the Olympians.
Canada. Canadian athletes started to get money for medals at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, but Paralympians were left out. This donor is trying to fill the gap. He put up $4 million, half of the money needed to pay Paralympic medalists.
The stories are so compelling and they're so human and emotional, and I can't get them out of my mind.
Even though Ottawa is also contributing $2 million, the Canadian Paralympic Committee still has to turn to generous donors to raise more.
It's not appropriate anymore for us to have 2 or 3 different tiered systems for how people participate in sport.
Back on the ice, McGregor says it's the beginning of change.
This helps create that virtuous cycle that allows us to continue to build and elevate the level of Paralympic sport here in Canada.
A hope that Paralympians will finally get the respect and pay they deserve. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
Comedian Jon Stewart is returning to American late-night TV just in time for the 2024 election cycle. He's coming back as the host of The Daily Show, but only on a weekly basis this time. Stuart previously hosted the late night current affairs program for 16 years before leaving in 2015. He'll be back on Mondays starting in February, while a rotating cast steps in for the rest of the week. Many fans are welcoming the news after Trevor Noah exited the program last year with no replacement. Stuart will also executive produce the talk show through 2025.
Oui, monsieur, vous l'avez!
Aha, the ace has successfully been chased and now caught. This is the moment last night when Danny and Morale Robbins drew the ace of hearts, taking home the more than $8 million jackpot that has been building for nearly a year in their New Brunswick village. It is believed to be the largest jackpot of its kind in the country. Well, that is it for us here on Canada Tonight. We are going to have our Spotlight segment, as we told you, tomorrow with Jeremy Hansen, who is going to be talking about that Artemis 2 mission and also much more in an in-depth conversation with him. Then later in the week, we will have the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, on the program in our Spotlight segment to talk a little bit about his dire warning for the future if we don't get artificial intelligence under control right now. Also, we will have the National coming up right after this short break here. Our chief correspondent, Adrian Arsenault, has a conversation with the Ukrainian First Lady, as we talked about earlier on in the show. Stay with us here on CBC News Network.